Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV. Still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation. It's the great debate, but it can only be a debate, of course, if you join in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls on 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back. Establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, then the volume on your television has to be down at 0, or no one will understand either of us, and I'll have to move on. Or you can SMS the show on 447800008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. So the Arabs have got a league. Not only that, that which we now know is called the Arab League is actually empowered to arm people, which must come as news to the Palestinian people who for 65 years have gone without arms as their country has been wiped off the map, their people scattered to the four corners of the earth, their people persecuted and hunted from pillar to post, occupied, annexed and besieged, and the Arab League didn't do that. But it turns out the Arab League has now given Syria's seat on the aforementioned Arab League to the Syrian opposition, and it's going to arm that Syrian opposition. Day after day, month after month, the people of Yemen were massacred by their dictatorship, and the Arab League didn't do that about it, let alone recognize the Yemen opposition now in power, let alone giving weapons to the Yemeni opposition when they were being massacred by their dictator, who continued to sit in the Arab League until the end. The people of Bahrain are gunned down on the streets of Manama and elsewhere in the country every single day. Is the Arab League going to arm the opposition in Bahrain? Is the Arab League going to give the opposition Bahrain's seat on the Arab League? I think we all know the answer to that. But it's not just the Arab League that is now unmasked as the body, the nest, the hive of hypocrisy that it is. William Hague told the British Parliament today that Britain is, after all, going to send military hardware to the aforementioned Syrian opposition. Not weapons, you understand, just tanks. Yes, tanks, but with no guns on them, you know, with the guns cut off. Armoured vehicles, body armour, so that they can, quote, move freely, said Mr. Hague. What is it about this Syrian opposition that has attracted the affection of Mr. Hague so? Not just Mr. Hague, but the governments of France, of Israel, and of the United States of America. And did you, if you're a British taxpayer, sign up in this impoverished, almost bankrupt country of ours to send the additional £13 million, which Mr. Hague agreed today to donate to the Syrian opposition? If you're out there as a pensioner shivering in the British winter, you might wonder if that money, which is yours, might have been used for some firewood to keep you warm this evening. Or if you are at school or university in Britain, you might wonder if that money might better have been spent here at home. That's one of our subjects tonight, but the other is simply inescapable, and he was simply irresistible. I refer, of course, to President Hugo Chavez, the late deceased President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. He was a friend of mine. It's painful for me to speak of him in the past tense. Just a couple of months ago, my wife and I spent almost 2 weeks in the country campaigning with him, for him, in his latest of 4 triumphant presidential election bids. After 14 years in power, he actually got the biggest vote he'd ever got in an electoral system regarded by all authorities, including President Jimmy Carter, the former President of the United States of America, as pristine, crystal clear. Indeed, President Carter described the last election as the best and fairest he had ever seen. President Chavez transformed the lives of the people of Venezuela. That will come out in the course of the next hour or so, I have no doubt. But he also knew that Venezuela was not an island entire into itself, that it was part of the Americas, part of the Latin American subcontinental area, part of the world. That's why President Chavez reached out to the Palestinian people, reached out in solidarity with the people of Iran under sanction and threat of war and attack from the very same imperialist forces that were constantly subverting his revolution. But they failed. Cancer killed him. At least at this moment, we imagine that it was cancer. The vice president, now the candidate of the governing party in Venezuela, says that he believes there's foul play involved in the disease that Chavez contracted. I have no evidence of that. All I know is that Fidel Castro was struck down with cancer, that President Chavez has been killed by cancer, that President Kirchner in Argentina was killed by cancer, that the president of Bolivia has got cancer, and as you know, I was a friend of the late President Arafat and watched him go from a vibrant leader to a shrunken human being in his bed in the military hospital in Paris, where he perished. And his bones have had to be exhumed to be tested for the presence of polonium, which may well have been the result, caused the result of his demise. I'm just saying, it's definitely something worth thinking about and definitely something worth talking about. President Ahmadinejad of Iran said that he was confident that Chavez would return on the day of resurrection, along with Jesus and the Imam Mahdi. All I can say is, I hope I'm there that day. I salute the memory of Hugo Chavez. I don't want this to become a maudlin or sentimental occasion. We need to look forward as well as celebrate the life of a very, very great man. Just one thought though, in all the interviews that I've done in the media, on the BBC, on Channel 4 News and so on, I'm constantly being told by supporters of the capitalist system in Britain and America that Chavez didn't do a great job with the Venezuelan economy. Huh? Not as good as the British politicians and the American politicians have done with the British and the American economies? That he was divisive, that he somehow widened the gap between the rich and poor in Venezuela, unlike those consensual politicians like George Bush, Tony Blair, David Cameron, George Osborne, and the rest. Amal is on the line from Wolverhampton in England, wants to talk about both Chavez and Syria. So let's hear from Amal. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway.
Good evening.
I'd like to say he was a great man. I salute him. We was glad to have someone like Chavez, and he will be never forgotten. He will be staying in history.
Amen.
And I hope it, as my president said, Ahmadinejad, I'm not Iranian, but a good president is a president of a nation, on the entire nation. And I believe Chavez was one of them. He done well. He brought peace to Latin America. He standed for what he believed in, and he especially helped the poor people, the people who are struggling in their life. And he was a great supporter for the Palestinian people. I wish that in the day, even if he wasn't my religion as a Muslim, but I wish that Allah will have mercy with his soul, and
Amen.
he will be celebrated with our Imam and with our great Imams. I hope it really, I hope it really, and he will never forget. Every child, he will remember each of us. I'd like to speak about Syria.
Yes.
As you say, Mr. Galloway, the money we need here in Britain. I mean, David Cameron knows how many British children go to bed and doesn't have no proper food. Yes. Did he know how many homeless people are there?
Millions of unemployed, young people on the streets with nothing to do and nowhere to go, and we're sending our money to the Syrian opposition, a significant part of whom are extremists so violent and so extreme that they have terrified every religious minority, every ethnic minority, and half the population of Syria who happen to be female, who are open supporters of Al-Qaeda. When I had a debate in Parliament last week, the minister accepted that he could not guarantee that the money that we were giving to the Syrian opposition would not end up in the hands of extremists Now we know from today, we're not just sending them money, we're sending them tanks, albeit tanks that don't fire weapons. And if you believe that, Amal, you'll believe anything.
I do believe, Mr. Galloway, and I do know these people. I mean, they are the one who create demolishing every terrorist and every Al-Qaeda. There was no Al-Qaeda when I born, 1979. There was no Al-Qaeda. They made it Al-Qaeda. They wanted that Syria come the second Somalia. And honestly, it is going to happen the second Somalia, but I hope the Syrian people will stand and they will recognize it before it's too late. This is another work for a revolution. This is a work for madman and killer and raper and suicide.
It's not to say, Amal, that the Syrian people have no legitimate demands. They do. It's not to say that every Syrian participating in this epic conflict is Al-Qaeda. They're not. But the truth is, a revolution supported by William Hague, supported by John McCain and Senator Lieberman and the President of France and Netanyahu in Israel, what kind of revolution can that possibly be?
That is not revolution, that is a suicide, and that is why the Syrian revolution didn't have my support, and I will never support them. But I wish Syria will be the Syria what we knew it before. It's the Syrian, there was a place for their people who fight for freedom fighter, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or all the Arabs. We run to Syria and we support for that Syria, but this is not the Syria what we knew it is. It's not our Syria.
Okay, Amal, thanks for getting us off to a flying start. The second caller is Cherno, and he's in Norway and wants to speak about both those subjects. Also, Cherno, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Mr. Galloway, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Go ahead.
First of all, I would like to send my deepest condolence to our great leader, Mr. Chavez.
Amen.
In Venezuela, and I hope his soul rests in perfect peace. And my point is, Mr. Galloway, you know, my grandparents, my three grandparents went to the Second World War and fought for the British war in Burma, came back home. They've never even received a nickel from the British. And today, and you know, I went to an English school. I learned history of, you know, of course, Africa and Europe. I've been listening to these human rights. I've been listening to, you know, this so-called democracy. I've been listening to so many things, you know, from the West. Okay, presently I live in a very great nation, you know, Norway, a wonderful country. And Norway has been giving, well, the last Nobel Peace Prize went to Mr. Obama, my fellow black brother. And in fact, the first point was, and I asked myself, why this Nobel Prize went to Mr. Obama? He just came into the office. He didn't start
he hadn't even taken his shoes off under the desk before he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And he's been killing people ever since.
And of course, you know, Norway is doing their best, you know, to make sure that, you know, there is peace worldwide. Mr. Galloway, people are suffering in Great Britain. In fact, I have learned yesterday and today that there are many school children, you know, in British schools who can't even have good food, you know, at school. They can't have even their lunch. And Britain is spending millions or billions, you know, in these so-called wars, supporting rebels, you know. And these are you remember the 9/11? They were accusing Muslims that, you know, wherever you go in Europe, they say Muslims are the terrorists, Muslims are like this, Muslims are doing that. But today they are the same Muslims rebels they are supporting in Syria.
As they did before in Libya, as they did before in Afghanistan in the 1980s. They're just rotten, stinking hypocrites, Cherno. That's the truth of the matter. One man, we sent our army now to fight Al-Qaeda in Mali, and we are sending tanks to Al-Qaeda in Syria at the same time. Why can't any British journalists see that and talk about that? Why is it left to a few lone voices? Cherno, we've lost him. Salahuddin's on the line though. He's in Ireland. Wants to talk about the UK and Syria. Salahuddin, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I just to comment about the Syria. The West Western country giving the arms to the Syria to solve the problem, but the arms is not going to be solve the problem. The arms going to kill the people, to kill the innocent people. I think the West has to create the things to all the Syrian to sit down on the table and to solve the problem, not with the arms. The arms, if you give the arms to the normal people, they doesn't know what is going to be cost them. They are started shooting. They're shooting the innocent people, shooting the kids, shooting everyone.
Well, I think it's come down to this, Salahuddin. The issue is not whether you're with the Syrian regime or against the Syrian regime. The issue is, are you with or against Syria and its survival, its continued existence as a state? Because the way things are headed, as Amal's put it in the first call, Syria is going to be Somalia very soon. And it's not just William Hague's weapons. It's not just the weapons that are going to come from Western governments. The Arab League decided today to, quote unquote, arm the Syrian opposition, while they left the Palestinians for 65 years without a single Kalashnikov in their hands coming from the Arab regimes. They left the Palestinian people to be massacred in Gaza and in camps all around them, including in their own countries. They never did that to come to the defense of the Palestinians. And now the Arab League is going to smuggle weapons through the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights to liberate Syria, bypassing Palestine, supposedly the heart of the matter. Salahuddin, good call. Wasn't a great line. Remember, if you get on the TV with me, your television has to be down at zero. Mojuko is on the line from Zambia. Wants to talk about the UK and Syria. Mojuko, good luck and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Walker. Thank you, Judge Galloway.
Thank you, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to speak on Syria.
Yeah.
There is a double-headed hypocrisy on the United States. People are being massacred in Syria with the weapons from the United States with their drones, and the world is watching. Britain, France, they are all culprits. But I didn't, even the Arab leagues, the so-called Arab leagues with the headdress, they are moving forward, destroying the fellow Arab countries, instead of defending it. Why are they helping? Look at this hypocrisy. In Yemen, people are dying, and making supporting the regime. What do they want? Is to change the regime in Syria. Let the Syrian people decide themselves.
Exactly. That's the only solution. Is for the Syrian people to resolve this matter themselves. And by the way, Mojuku, only 3 Arab countries voted against this decision to arm the Syrian rebels. Algeria, I'm slightly surprised to say, was one. Lebanon was the other, and Iraq was the third. The others either voted for it or abstained. Shame on them. But I tell them this, and I know that they will get this message, because I know that they watch Press TV. You hypocrites, you will face the same fate one day. Foreigners will instruct your brothers in the Arab League to vote for the dismemberment of your country, to vote for the partition of your country, for the destruction of your country. And you know what? Your brothers will do it, because what is abundantly clear, there is no act so debased, there is no act of cowardice so brazen, there is no act so vile that the Arab regimes will not kneel down and perform it on the orders of the Khawaja, of the foreigners who keep you in power with their guns, their money, their diplomatic and political support. May you all burn in hell upon your demise. You are a disgrace. You should be ashamed of yourselves. The Arabs should be ashamed of their leaders. And I'm ashamed to have spent my lifetime standing beside and standing up for the Arabs whose leaders voted for this latest crime in the Arab League yesterday. Jeff's on the line in England, in Lincolnshire, on Chavez. Jeff, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Welcome, go on.
I'd be remiss not to pay a word of tribute to the great man who died earlier this week. I think the American actor Sean Penn probably put it best when he said that the people of Venezuela have lost their champion, and the people of America and around the world have lost a friend that, for the most part, they didn't even know they had.
Yes.
And I think the thing with Chavez is that there will be people who, hated him a lot, and that they'll see this as a good day. But in a way, that's only the final confirmation, as far as I'm concerned, that he was doing something right.
Exactly
in his,
so.
Presidency.
Exactly so. Now, I've been away for a couple of days in Beirut. Has New Labour said anything upon the demise of Hugo Chavez? Because I've Googled it and can't find anything from the Labour leadership at all. Have they had nothing to say about a story that's dominating the news all over the world?
Not that I've seen. I did see, to give a little bit of credit where it's due, I did see William Hague I don't know, he sent his condolences and so on, but nothing from the Labour Party.
It was reasonable. Diane Abbott spoke well on the subject. She was with me in November last in Venezuela for the elections, but of course she's not, unfortunately, one of the leaders of the Labour Party. I looked for any statement from Ed Miliband. I looked from any statement from somebody called Douglas Alexander, who, to my astonishment, is the shadow foreign secretary. I didn't find anything. And I just thought that that was telling. I'll tell you why, Jeff, because all Chavez was doing was carrying through policies and ideals that used to be the ABC of Labourism. Was just doing the kind of things that Labour used to try to do, or at least say that it wanted to do, Jeff.
Precisely, yes. And I think everyone remembers the presidential election last year. Fewer people probably remember there was a regional election shortly after, and during the campaign for which Chavez was mostly out of the country, and his party still won convincingly. So I think those people are going to be very disappointed if they really think that much is going to change in 30 days' time.
Well, I know Nicolas Maduro very well. I knew him when he was trade union leader for the bus drivers in Venezuela. He's an outstanding figure. Of course, people say he's not Hugo Chavez, but nobody else is Hugo Chavez. There's not two Hugo Chavez in the world, never mind in Venezuela. What's your feeling about the outcome in the upcoming election, Jeff?
I think Maduro will win. I certainly hope Maduro will win. You're right. I mean, he's definitely not a Hugo Chavez, but like you said, who is? And to the extent that there is going to be difficulty recreating the kind of politician that people can relate to, like they're related to Chavez, at the end of the day, it's just a tribute to the greatness of the man, isn't it? And if I may just very quickly say a word about the arming of the Syrian rebels. Yeah. I find it interesting that they're talking about arming these Syrian rebels, yet for some reason, well, not arming them, but giving them money.
Well, giving them armoured vehicles, body armour, and millions of pounds, which they can do with as they please.
Very, very ironic that for some reason, we must do everything we can to stop children's nappies and peanut butter and sesame seeds and coriander from reaching the people of Gaza.
Yeah.
But for the people of the rebels in Syria,
it's guns and guns and guns. Jeff, thanks for that great call. God willing, I'll be back right after the news with the second half of Comment. Don't miss it. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still giving voice to the voiceless. The great Spartacus Hugo Chavez has passed, we hope, to a better place. And he certainly left Venezuela a better place than he found it. At least if you were poor, at least if you were young, at least if you were black, at least if you were disabled, at least if you were from the indigenous Venezuelan population, at least if you had any sense of us and always, as opposed to me and now. The gold-toothed emigres in Miami were dancing on his grave. Well, the dogs can, of course, dance on the lion's grave, but they can never be a lion. And talking of lions, or lying perhaps, the British minister told me in the House of Commons in the debate I forced on the subject of Britain's relationship with the Arab world that we were not in any sense giving weapons to the Syrian opposition, but that he couldn't guarantee that the millions we were giving them would not find its way into the hands of extremists. Well, today there was an update from the British Foreign Office. William Hague, that great champion of revolution, you might have noticed his sterling support for the democratic revolution in Bahrain, for example. You might have noticed what a great fight he put up for the democratic revolution in Yemen, when the dictator there was killing the people on the streets every day, demanding the right to vote. You may know that the British government is a big friend of democracy in Saudi Arabia, or you may not, because they are not. But we are now sending tanks, and 13 million additional pounds sent this day by the British government to the Syrian opposition. What is it about the Syrian opposition that has so attracted the affection of governments like Mr. Netanyahu's, like the President of France, like the President of the United States, and like David Cameron's government here in London? You might well ask. So we're talking about Hugo Chavez, and we're talking about the Arab League's decision to arm the Syrian opposition. Who knew the Arabs had a league? Who knew that it was able to arm people? Who knew that it could have, if it had wanted to, these last 65 years past, armed the almost wholly unarmed Palestinian population under occupation, annexation, and siege in Gaza these last years past? But they didn't do that to help the Palestinians, but they are going to arm the Syrian opposition under orders from the governments in the West that keep the dictators that run the Arab League in power. Well, Aidan is always worth listening to. He's in London. He wants to talk about Syria. Aidan, welcome to the show.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me back.
Welcome, mate.
Yeah, sorry about Hugo Chavez.
Very sad, yeah.
It was sad news, actually, yeah, when we heard him die.
Just 58 years old.
Yeah, and didn't expect it to happen. We thought he'd make it through, but he didn't, did he?
No. When he returned to Venezuela from Cuba, I first hoped that that was the beginning of recovery. But of course, as everyone else now knows, he merely returned to his homeland to die. He lived and died for Venezuela as a paratrooper, as a tank commander, as a president, as a patriot, and as a real Latin American hero, and one whose name resounded across the world. I was thinking last night on Channel 4 News, Aidan, of just asking this simple question. Can anybody name any other president that Venezuela has ever had? I doubt if anybody watching this program or last night's Channel 4 News could have answered that. Anyway, Aidan, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's right. I mean, yeah, I agree. It's about Syria. Sorry, we'll talk about this again.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. If Assad is not removed from power, I know that keeping him there, supporting the rebels in Syria is complete hypocrisy when you see what's happening in neighbouring Bahrain, and of course the Palestinian catastrophe. But if Assad does succeed and he remains in power, and this revolution, this Arab Spring, this movement that's going on in the Arab world it hits it hard, and sort of. What would you? I mean, is it a good thing? Would you say it's a good thing that Assad?
Let me. It's a very important question that you raise, and you raise it as always very well and sincerely. The first point that has to be made is that if President Assad were to leave this evening, there's nobody seriously believes that the war would end. The war would not end, not least because tens of thousands of foreign extremists have been exported into Syria, and they're not going to go away, you know. They're not going to pack their bags and say Bashar al-Assad has flown to Moscow or flown to Tehran, and so we'll go back to Chechnya and Libya and Pakistan and England and all the parts of the world from which they have come. Of course not. They're going to continue their struggle for their own brand of Takfiri extremism. They're already implementing it in those parts of Syria that they have captured, irrespective of whether the people want it or not, irrespective of whether the people are Muslims or their kind of Muslims, whether they're Christians or Kurdish or Arabic. These people are imposing and will impose upon Syria a set of policies which will simply break Syria apart. Syria will no longer exist as a state, as a country that has had roughly the borders that it has had for hundreds of years. And that which was wonderful about Syria, the fact that Christians and Muslims, that Sunni and Shia, the Arabs and Kurds could live in a harmonious community, irrespective of the character of the government that they had, which is another matter altogether. Syria is not Afghanistan. It's not even Saudi Arabia. Syria is a Mediterranean, metropolitan, plural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious community, polity. And it cannot be ruled by Al-Qaeda from Libya or from Chechnya or from Pakistan. It will not be ruled in that way. And therefore the country will break apart into emirates. And that's the Sykes-Picot II that I have been speaking about these last years. They want to break the Arab world up, not into 23 countries, but into possibly hundreds of emirates, the better for them to divide and rule. And if those emirates are based, if possible, on confessional, sectarian bases, then that will make it even easier. And the Arabs can fight each other for the next 100 years so that the West can pick their pockets, as they did over the last 100. That's my view, Aidan. Thanks for the call, though. Mohammed's on the line in Baghdad on Hugo Chavez. Mohammed, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. George. Gladly to hear your voice again.
And me to hear yours. I love your voice. I love your accent. I salute all my friends in Iraq. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely, my warm condolences for people in Latin America, especially in Venezuela. I lift my heart for Hugo Chavez, who fight and support the cases of people feeling poor or oppressed, who fight against the big cancer. Hugo Chavez is the extension of freedom voices. Before Che Guevara, now we have now Chavez, Morales, Jose Mojica, here in Middle East, Dr. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and those leaders, they still in our hearts. So all I said to Latin America people, thanks for you, thanks Mr. Chavez, God bless your soul, and I hope the best for my friends in Latin America.
Well, what a very moving call from Mohammed in Baghdad on the demise of Hugo Chavez, a man of such stature that people are shedding tears for him in Baghdad and in Tehran and in Beirut, where I was yesterday. That's quite an achievement for a poor boy from a Latin American country, and no one can name a single other president that Venezuela has ever had. Wow, Ahmed is in Germany. He wants to talk about the UK and Syria. Ahmed, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, good evening, Galloway.
Good evening, sir. Go ahead.
And I would like to speak about Syria, and I make 3 points.
Yeah.
I mean, why the Western country learn about Al-Qaeda? First they support in Afghanistan, first they support in Iraq, first they support in Somalia. And now they are supporting Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, which is they tell us. And they telling us last 10 years, Al-Nusra is type of Al-Qaeda. And now they are supplying weapons, especially UK and America. So the world, why follow to the Western countries? That's my 1 point. Another point is, a lot of people saying Syria is going to be like Somalia. Thank God, Somalia, we don't have got that kind of problem Syria has it. We fight ourselves, but we don't fighting about what terrorists fighting in Syria. So I'm saying when we're from British community, why you are not looking your street in London and Belfast and Glasgow, the young people, the adults, the children, families, they are really need the money your government supplying from UK, where they're supplying from Syria terrorists. Why the community they are not stand up? Why the British people they cannot see that? As you say, Galloway, why British journalists they cannot see that? Why?
Well, I wish I had an answer to that, Ahmed, and I'm ashamed to face you and tell you that I don't have an answer to that. All I can tell you is that all the breath that God gives me, I am using to try to make them see it. I'm sorry, I want to press on. Andreas is on the line from Cyprus, and he wants to talk about the UK and Syria. Go ahead, Andreas. Welcome back.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. Good evening.
Good evening to you, sir. Go ahead.
I would just like to say about the UK helping the Syrian rebels.
Yeah.
When are the Arabs, the Muslims, going to understand this is the target of the Western countries to destroy, to set Muslim against Muslim and Arab against Arabs? I mean, it's amazing that these Arab countries do not understand that the Arab League is a disgrace. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they're sending the weapons, where they're giving weapons. I don't know. The target of the UK and America is to destroy the Arab race and set Arab against Arab. That is the target.
Although it's not difficult, Andreas, it's surprisingly easy. Mr. Sykes and Mr. Picot in the parliament where I sit for the last 25 years did that, and it lasted the best part of 100 years. And it looks to me now like the Arabs are on track for another 100 years of Sykes-Picot 2, which will even be worse than Sykes-Picot 1. And the problem lies in the leadership and in the failure of the masses to change the leadership. There's only one Arab leader worthy of the title, and he's not even officially the leader of a country. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah is the only Arab leader who has 2 eyes, who can see clearly this game that's being played of divide and rule, of turning Arab against Arab, Muslim against Muslim. It is so very easy. And the Arabs should be ashamed this evening. And I'm ashamed to have stood with them for so long, that they have such leaders, that are such slaves of the imperial system, that they will even turn on their own selves and gnaw off their own arms, amputate their own legs for the delectation of the Khawaja, of the foreigner. Andreas, great to hear from you again, as always. Greg is in Lancashire, wants to talk about Chavez. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hello, good evening, George.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I was just wondering what you would think was going to happen to Venezuela regarding the power struggle that is imminent. Because I remember when I heard about the news of your friend's death, and I was ultimately struck down by it, as there's so many implications that the predominantly right-wing media has refused to tell, and that they are painting him almost as a dictator who, as we all know, has allowed some of the most perfect elections in recent times. But despite their support for dictatorships around the world, ranging from Saudi Arabia to others, I was just wondering what you thought about that.
Well, I don't know, of course. I haven't a crystal ball, and I don't know what forces will be unleashed upon the people of Venezuela over the next 30 days or so in the presidential election. I know that Nicolas Maduro is an outstanding figure. It's twice the man that the opposition are likely to put up against him. Capriles, who stood against Chavez in November, who's like a student politician, like a boy. And the contrast will be very marked. And the vision of Venezuela will be very clear as projected by either candidate. One will be a continuation of the transfer of wealth from the state and the wealthy to the mass of the people, the continued investment in social infrastructure. I could run through it all. 94% of Venezuelans today eat 3 meals a day, which maybe doesn't sound much to me and Greg. Maybe we eat too much in any case. But in a country that 14 years ago had millions of its people on the edge of starvation, it is a fantastic transformation. Chavez built more than 40 universities in 14 years, the 5th largest student body in the entire world in a country with just 29 million people. I was on the Jeremy Vine show on BBC yesterday, I think. It was being hosted by Vanessa Feltz. In her introductory remarks, she said that Chavez was, and I mean this is a quotation, accused of splashing the country's money around on new schools and hospitals. How dastardly is that? How despotic, how tyrannical, how dictator-like to splash your country's money on new schools and hospitals. You really couldn't make it up. Greg, thanks for the call and the passion that was in it. Faxion is on the line from Zimbabwe. He wants to talk about Syria. Welcome, sir. Go ahead.
How are you?
Yes, very well. Good to hear from you. Go on.
Fine. I'm sorry. I want to talk about Syria, the situation in Syria.
Yes, go ahead.
You doing?
Faxion, you'll have to turn the volume down on your TV, I'm afraid, or I'll have to cut you off. Do that right now, please, and go on.
Okay, let me put my volume off.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, brother, go ahead. Yes, brother, go ahead.
Yeah. Mr. George Galloway.
Yes.
I'm now hereby trying to talk about the situation in Syria, which I heard and which I see in your on press TV.
Yeah.
These so-called Americans, I think they are so hypocrites, and they are people who are always vandalizing other nations. They are destroying other nations' structure. And also, I wanted to give you a vision that how can these people, Syrians, being come together and fought with those Americans so that they will not do such systems of
well, look, the big
people.
powers don't want them to come together. They don't want the Arabs to come together. They don't want the Syrians to come together. All I'm saying is the Arabs and the Syrians are making it very, very easy for the foreigners who don't want them to come together. the Kofi Annan plan for a negotiated transition to democracy in Syria should have been supported by everyone. And we could be well on our way to it now. But Kofi Annan had to resign because nobody was supporting his plan, not even the United Nations, whose plan it supposedly was. Eamon is in France, wants to talk about Chavez and Syria, possibly the last call of the evening. Eamon, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, go ahead.
I'd like to talk about the president of Venezuela and offer my sincere condolences to the people and tell them that they offered the word a man, and also I'd like to say that Mr. Chavez has more humanity and life in him deceased than all of those evil Arab leaders united and their docile representatives who festoon the seats of the Arab League of whoredom. I mean, getting rid of your jobless young people by sending them to blow themselves up and kill fellow Muslims in Syria mirrors just how obnoxiously wicked and cheap these people are. But I'm quite confident they will be held accountable and will be thrown in the dumpster of history. But, you know, it's never too late to learn decency from real men. They can always start with you. They can look up to you, and people like Ahmadinejad. I know I'm setting the bar quite high, but this is just the plain truth. And thank you. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to express myself here, because I couldn't do it when I was back in my country in Algeria. I had to come here to France to be able to talk freely. So thank you.
Thank you, Eamon, and for the depth of the comments that you made about President Chavez, and I would like to echo them. The people of Venezuela, from very poor and humble background, have thrust onto the world stage a man of real greatness. It's one of the great privileges of my life that I was able to get close to such a man and to work on the streets of Caracas for such a man's great victory so recently in November. It is almost unbearable that so soon after that victory he was struck down and his term has been cut short. But I believe that the ideas and the spirit of Hugo Chavez will live on. And I believe that they will live on not just in the poor barrios of Venezuela, but will echo through the slums of France and England, through Africa and Asia, and everywhere around the world where men and women love freedom and struggle for liberty. He was a truly great figure. He was a giant. And the dwarves who seek to ridicule and traduce his record in the Western media today are not fit to tie his shoelaces. Hasta siempre, comandante.
Hello, if you just comment your name and the place you left my number, and just make sure that your television volume is set to 0. So, 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You'll be directly put through. Just leave your phone number, and then we'll call you back. Comment.